How are we going, everybody? Welcome to a live stream and a live stream with a stable internet connection because I am actually now back in the UK. You may well see a slightly different background. I'm coming to you from country abode, but yes, we were in Malawi the past 2 weeks, and I have to be honest, I'm quite impressed with the level of content and the conversations we even had to have even in that part of the world. Thank you, Starlink. I will admit that it is something that works, but we're doing something interesting. We're doing something where we're streaming to Substack as well. And so if you aren't yet on Substack, I recommend you check it out because my guest, Ben Cohen, is a prominent writer on many things American, UK, a bit of a smorgasbord of everything, Ben. I don't know if that'd be a fair way to put it, but how are you doing at the moment? And I think it's the first time we've had you on the channel as well as the Substack, which I think we've done a couple of times, but independently of YouTube.
I'm good, thank you, Pyotr, and thank you for having me on. I'm glad you back from Malawi, safe and sound. Yes, I guess I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist, although my background is in international relations, where I studied at university in the UK. But yeah, more focused on US politics because that's where I live in Washington DC, and I've been out here I've been in DC for about 13, 14 years now. So I am in belly of the beast, where all the action is happening.
Yeah, and I see some people on the comments already. A lion took me. Actually, that was the last thing I saw. Was lions. 5 young males. It was quite interesting, actually, in this sort of small group. But no, I'm here. And Ben, I mean, what I thought would make an interesting conversation, because we do these intermittently, but I think it'd be interesting to do them more sort of consistently, is we wanted to sort of look at the war in Ukraine, but from Trump's perspective. You had an interesting conversation on your Substack with someone else about Trump's weird relationship with the Kremlin, with Putin, with generally sort of strongmen. And that's kind of what inspired me to want to talk to you about it as well. So, you know, living in the swamp, in the blob, as some people call it, right? What's the general sentiment you see amongst people about Trump and his relationship to the Russians, or to Putin specifically?
Well, I think because DC is obviously, we're in deep blue territory here. So the consensus really amongst people was that the guy is completely corrupt and in bed with Vladimir Putin. I think that is the general consensus, at least here in DC. And obviously for good reason, because I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, the interview you were referencing was with Craig Unger, who he's written several books on Trump's relationship with Russia that goes back all the way back to, I believe, 1987. So I think it's kind of fairly well known. But at this point, you know, add it to the list of scandals and catastrophes that the Trump administration is involved in, and it's fairly low down the list at the moment, the hierarchy of issues. And one of the reasons I brought Craig on was because I still think this is a big problem. That you've got a guy in the White House who is essentially doing Vladimir Putin's bidding. He is everything. It is very interesting to look at his position on Ukraine, his position on NATO, his position on Europe. Dovetails almost exactly with Vladimir Putin's foreign policy agenda. Why is that?
But do you think that he's literally, like, I'll just cut to the blunt question immediately. Like, do you think that he is an agent? Right, there's this idea that he's Agent Krasnov, some kind of KGB asset that was acquired in the 80s, and he's been doing the bidding of the Kremlin ever since. And now, you know, he's destroying America or doing Putin's bidding from the inside out.
So I would regard that as a conspiracy theory. So I think that, and that's where I think much of the left has gone wrong on this thing, that they believe that Trump is, you know, literally a Russian agent. And I think there's a distinction, obviously, between agent and asset. And I think that's what Craig Unger points out so well in his books and his writing, that he's the classic definition of a Russian asset, where he's been not coerced, but seduced by the Russians, invited over to the Soviet Union in the 80s, given a very good time, stayed at the best hotels, potentially investment in his own businesses, and perhaps compromat, which I think that Craig Unger won't say. He won't say it out loud, but I will. I think that they have compromise on him. I think they have deeply compromising information on Trump. It's a mixture of the carrot and the stick, right? Where he's benefited from the relationship with them, with the Russian mob members and the Kremlin, which are, as I'm sure you'll know more about this, but very intertwined. And he's benefited from all of this massively. And as a result, he knows what his foreign policy positions have to be. I mean, why else would you come back from Russia and take out a full-page ad in the New York Times, basically talking about dismantling NATO and setting out objectives for the US that sound remarkably similar to that of the Soviet Union? So I think he's an asset. I think that there's likely compromise on him. I've heard through various sources that that's the case. Obviously, I can't verify that. But yeah, not an agent. I think that's kind of silly. I don't think Trump is...
What is it? So, I mean, you write about Trump a lot. What have you been working on recently? What have you published recently on Substack that's, reflects on this?
What, on the fact that he wouldn't fit the bill of an agent? Well, I mean, he's completely chaotic, unpredictable, unreliable. So I don't think anyone would ever use Donald Trump as an agent, as an inside agent. We've been following what's been going on in Iran, which is an absolute catastrophe. If this is the genius negotiator that we've all been led to believe by his cult members, then I don't know what to make of it. It's completely chaotic. We've got a ceasefire with Iran happening every week, and they go back to lobbing bombs at each other. And apparently the Strait of Hormuz is open, then it's closed, and it's open, then it's closed, and he's negotiated the deal, then he hasn't. So I guess to tie that back to your point about Trump being an agent, no, I don't think so. But asset, yes. I don't know. What's your take on this?
On what specifically? His relationship to the Kremlin?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's preposterous to say that he's an agent. There's not any real enough evidence, and that's where I deviate from the sort of the staunchly Ukraine camp, because I just think that it's like any side. If you start looking for any narrative that suits, you'll start looking for anything to suit your preferred narrative. And in this case, because Trump has, aspirations, or he appreciates the strongman personality traits of Putin especially, but also Xi. I mean, look at the way he acted around President Xi Jinping, what he said about Taiwan, the way he speaks about Erdogan, Beijing, and Netanyahu, albeit he's irritated with him because of Iran. Point is, the guy wants to replicate some of the things that people have done in their respective countries. That's why JD Vance, which is, I don't think enough people talked about it, but when I made a video on the impact of the Hungarian election last month, right, I recorded it in sort of 10-15 minutes and it got 120,000 views, just because I was emphasizing the point that it's really weird for a vice president of the United States to fly to, it's not like it's England or another major power, no offense to Hungary, but he flew to Hungary to lobby on behalf of a foreign election. That's never show me any case in previous US history where that's happened. It hasn't. So he really likes these strongman tendencies. And that aside from the fact that he just wants the peace deal in Ukraine, he doesn't care what happens to Ukraine. He just wants peace because then he can claim that he's, the best president ever and all this sort of stuff. And we can see how difficult it is, which is kind of why I titled this video as I did, because in the past week, the Americans basically said, oh, we give up, whatever, can't be bothered. So they're basically pulling out of supporting efforts to find a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, which is leaving the European Union. So, I was interested to speak to someone from the US-centric perspective, or who's based in DC at least, about how they look and sort of what are the messaging signals they're hearing from DC about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think now obviously the establishment in DC is the Trump party, right? We are now in the Republic of Trump. So if you go onto the Capitol, that's basically, Ukraine are the bad guys. Zelensky is a sort of a grifter, a corrupt grifter in charge of a hopelessly corrupt country filled with Nazis. and Trump is basically putting him in his place and telling him that he needs to I don't know, clean up his own country and hold elections during a war. So I guess that's the perspective on the Hill, but the perspective amongst the sort of, I guess the chattering classes over here is very different. But it's, but again, I think it's not really viewed as being such a big issue anymore, which is still surprising because of how geopolitically important this is. I mean, this is it's a huge deal, and it doesn't look like it's going that well for the Russians right now, and Ukraine seems to be doing just fine without America's help, which I think is a very interesting development over time. But again, it's you don't really see that much about Putin and Russia in the news anymore. It's not a hot topic. It's not a hot button topic anymore. Everything's moved on, at least in.
Are you speaking from the perspective of Washington and the US?
Yeah. That I would say in the US, Russia is no longer viewed as being a very big deal.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, we are getting quite a lot of coverage. I mean, I don't know if I read the BBC or some other news, it is being mentioned occasionally. I mean, everything's been overshadowed by the war in Iran, but even that's taken a backward seat as the world just we all become rather normalized to it, right? The peace deal or MOU, which is a more accurate representation. It's not an actual peace deal. It's just a bunch of words saying, hey, this is what we intend to do. It's a framework, so it's non-committal in any way. But that even has taken a back seat, really, because the war has largely just stopped. The two have war of words, occasional flare-ups like the US striking parts of Iran, but that's largely it. In the case of Ukraine, I think it is heating up right now. The Russians have struck a large proportion of Ukraine in some of the worst strikes in the war, if not the worst. And Putin is really upping the rhetoric in threats towards Europe, threatening potential sort of attacks on Baltics. Or there was a yesterday on Thursday there was a strike on a Romanian flat, right? Basically a drone from the Russians went haywire and it struck a residential apartment in Romania, which is a NATO member, firstly, but secondly, no people were killed. But what's most frustrating is that NATO continues simply just to send words of condemnation, of criticism, of ridicule. That's great, guys. When are we actually going to do something about it? Because this is happening more and more frequently. So, the United States, Trump has decided to sort of give up on this and pull out at a time when things seem to be heating up, and precisely because I think Putin smells an opportunity because the Americans aren't willing to get engaged or follow through. And so the Europeans are now feeling like, well, if Russia does launch some kind of large scale set of airstrikes, is America going to come to our support or not? So, yeah, I think there's quite a lot happening. But again, it seems like, based on your conversations with Craig, Trump is just indifferent, or he doesn't.
Yeah, completely. I would say completely indifferent. Regards it not as a sort of particularly important conflict. Doesn't really want to get involved with any peace negotiations. But I mean, as you say, it seems like a pretty dangerous escalation to be hitting places like Romania. Is this Putin kind of rattling the cage? Is he trying to figure out? Is he trying to prod and see what kind of reaction he can get? Is that the strategy there?
Yeah, it's provocation, right? He's trying to see what he can get away with, and how far he can push the envelope, so to speak. But again, there's one comment that I've seen which I'm quite interested. Sort of people need to understand that Trump is predominantly transitional or transactional.
Transactional, definitely.
They've put him as transitional, but
well, that too. I mean, if he leaves,
But how much is that? What does that mean? He's just planning to sell off the country in the next few years, before he is forced out of office, hopefully. He's just trying to see how much damage he can do to the United States indirectly or through self-sabotage. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a really interesting question. So I have my own theories on this, and I don't necessarily think, I think multiple things can be true at the same time. Trying to figure out what this guy's motivations are, it's complicated. Because look, I mean, if you look at his history, I mean, he's extremely greedy, and he is very transactional, and things are done on a you do this for me and I do that for you kind of basis. And if he thinks he can cheat or scam someone, he will. If he thinks he can get away with it. So I think that, I'm not convinced that he's going to leave office in 2028. And I know this puts me in the kind of Trump derangement conspiracy theorist nutjob tribe, but hear me out on this. I think that he has committed so many crimes while in office, and it's so corrupt. If you look at kind of the dealings going on, I mean, I know someone in the Trump administration. Well, I can't divulge too many details about this, but somebody who I'm familiar with in the Trump administration who just cannot unbelieve the level of corruption going on inside the White House. Is orders of magnitude bigger than anything that we've ever seen. And this is, this hasn't really trickled into the MAGA world, but, there are lots of other places reporting on this stuff that, I mean, you can buy a presidential pardon. $5 million will get you a presidential pardon. That a lot of that money, if you funnel it through crypto projects, a lot of the crypto criminals have been pardoned. He's given them a pardon because they have invested in his projects, given contracts to his sons. The entire Trump family is profiting. They're making out like bandits. Somebody has access to, somebody knows beforehand what Trump is going to announce foreign policy wise, and is making bets on Polymarket they've made millions and millions of dollars on Polymarket, with a stunningly accurate record. So I think that I don't know how he leaves, right? If you've got that much corruption, which the Democrats are going to have to investigate. They're going to have to do it, and they are going to have to impeach him. It is just, that's what will happen. They won't be able to ignore it because the scale of the crimes is so enormous. And I think that people like Trump don't leave willingly. They don't. And he didn't in 2020. On January 6, 2021, Trump tried to overthrow the government, right? He led a violent insurrection onto the Capitol. People seem to forget this. He tried to find votes in Georgia where there weren't any. He led a massive disinformation campaign about the 2020 election and the 2024 election when he thought he was going to lose it. He claimed the Democrats were rigging it and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm not convinced that the guy is going to go anywhere in 2028. So I don't think so. So that kind of puts a slightly different light on what he's doing now. The alternative view on that is that he is, like, as you say, he's basically trying to just strip the state bare, and hand off contracts to his family and enrich himself and his cronies before he leaves office. And he's planning on leaving office because he doesn't want to stick around anymore. That could also be true. I remain unconvinced of that until proven otherwise. I just don't see Trump being able to leave the limelight. I don't see him. He's a reality TV star. He needs to be in the limelight. And he needs to have power. I think once you fly around the world on Air Force One, what else are you going to do after that? Go and sit and playing golf in Mar-a-Lago? I don't think so. But that's my take on it. So anyway, I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong, and I'm completely open to being wrong on this. But don't underestimate this guy's thirst for power ever.
Yeah, but like, what can he do to forcibly stay in power? He doesn't have the capacity to do so. It's already been disregarded that sort of Vance could run in 28 and then he steps down and Trump takes over as VP. That's not possible. And VP and Vance seems to be being sidelined anyway.
He can run as VP for sure. He could definitely run as vice president. Would he do that? I don't know. But my guess is, but this was supposed to be impossible in Russia, right? When Putin was, there had term limits in Russia, and then all of a sudden there weren't any term limits. And I think that Trump's capacity for destruction and capacity to create spectacle and conflict is, when he's backed into a corner, when he feels threatened, is extreme, and he will go to any length to stay in power. Like, there's almost nothing the guy won't do, and we saw that in 2021 rather, when he's backed up against the wall, and if he's losing and if he's being attacked. Trump is at his absolute best when he's being attacked, and that's why I think psychologically he wants to lose the midterms. I think he wants the Democrats to investigate him. I think he wants them to impeach him so he has an enemy to run against, because that sets it all up for him. That sets.
But he can't run again.
I mean, sure, he allegedly. I mean, that's it's a piece of paper.
But Ben, he can't. The US has checks and balances in it as a democracy that Russia doesn't. Russia's never really been a democracy. So
sure,
I think the US system actually can. He can't break the system, can he?
Yeah, I think he can break the system. I think he can, if he creates a big enough conflict and says that there's a huge danger from the radical left, that they are rigging elections, that they are allowing immigrants into the country to illegally vote. They've got dead people voting. They've got illegal Mexicans coming in through the border, and Venezuelans. The Venezuelans are the big the pariahs at the moment, and they're coming in and they want to turn America into Venezuela 2.0. Then he can say, yeah, look, I can save you. Only I can. We need to suspend the Constitution, or I have to run again. I mean, look, I'm not convinced it's going to happen, but that's my baseline. But my baseline is he's going to pull some crazy. I think the next couple of years are going to be Trump at his absolutely most dangerous, and I think that people have been lulled into a false sense of security that he'll go quietly. The US is a democracy, and pre 2016, the notion that somebody like Donald Trump would get into power, it just would have been impossible. Nobody would have ever imagined that this guy could be in the White House, let alone win the White House twice, right? After his years during COVID and destroying the country during COVID, and an insane death toll under his watch. Probably 1 million people died in America, and at least half of them were probably avoidable had Trump not botched the US response to the pandemic. And he got back in again. So his ability to smash through the Overton window is unparalleled, is unprecedented in America. So I think that what we think is impossible today, fast forward a couple of years, it might look very, very different.
And where does this leave the Russian aspect then? Do you think that he would be trying to leverage? I don't know. Could he actually bring on some recommendations from Putin of how to do it or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, he admires strongmen. He loves them. That's why he is obsessed with Vladimir Putin, and because it would be so much easier to run like a strongman. So I think that if he could, that's what he would do. But he's being constrained by the system. The system in America, as you say, has been it's actually held up remarkably well. I think most of our other countries would have basically, Trump would have been a dictator by now. It would have completely dismantled democracy. But the US, with the state system and separation of powers, I think that has basically curtailed his worst instincts, or his worst behavior rather. But the instincts are still there.
Do you think he's really unwell then? Because I was reading one article yesterday, I think it was Putin, in the Wall Street Journal, suggesting that Putin he spent $27 billion on trying to extend his life or to do more towards immortality. Do you think Trump would be trying to do something? Yeah, good. There was a clip from about 6 months ago of President Xi Jinping of China and Putin of Russia talking about the idea of living to 150 years old. I mean, some people reckon it might have been a joke by them, but I don't think so. I think that there is a genuine concerted effort by Mr. Putin to look at extending his lifetime beyond, he's 71, 72. He's legally meant to be in power for another 10 years. But, you know, the guy is obviously not keen to go anywhere, and he's got limitless amounts of money that he's siphoned from the state, the oligarchs all around him. The system he's built is incredibly complex and intricate. And that he's spending these billions towards. Could you see Trump trying to do that through his world liberty media and cryptos, you know, trying to find a way to live forever?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's as dangerously ill as, say, Vladimir Putin. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's a psychopath. I think Putin may. I don't know what your take on it is, but I feel like he probably fits the definition of at least a sociopath. And I think that Trump is maybe not necessarily quite as deranged as Vladimir Putin. Weirdly, he's less. He's much more impulsive. Trump. He's much more impulsive and chaotic. And whereas Putin is very controlled and calculated, but I mean, Putin is a real psycho, and I don't know if I put Trump in the same category. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I think that's largely clear. Putin is he's an FSB KGB agent, therefore he's very crafty and cunning in that regard. The power play. Trump is an idiot. I used to try and think, well, maybe there's a deeper seated strategy here, or he's playing, you know, I used to try to humor the ideas of 4D chess, 5D chess, as the true MAGA supporters say. 4D chess was so 2024.
Yeah.
Absolute joke. But no, the guy's just an idiot. And the whole reason he went to war is just because he got irritated with the peace talks. And to reference another article you wrote about, thanks Obama, right? You know, what is he coming out of this with? A lesser decent version of the JCPOA. But that's largely what it is. It's just a rehash of the same shit that we had before, but with greater terms to the Iranians and more restrictive terms to the Americans. So no, Trump doesn't have the capacity to play sort of multiple versions of 4D, 5D chess, and somehow it's all outranking. I do think Putin's getting more paranoid and unstable as the war gets worse and his political position gets more untenable. But generally speaking, I think, yeah, it's they're incredibly different. Oh, someone's just commented 4 dementia chess. Yes, I like that. 4D, the D standing for dementia. In Trump's case, at least. But yeah, no, I think the only people who are deranged when we talk about TDS are those who continue to sort of find any reason to say Trump is doing the right thing or ahead of the game. TDS is a coping mechanism that these people who cannot accept the reality that this guy is losing the plot, losing the war in Iran, not in control of the US economy, not in control of his support base. And they are the ones that are deranged, continue to try and justify that.
I agree. I mean, I would say that. Yeah, I would say that I would not underestimate Trump's. He has a particular kind of genius, though, which I think should not be underestimated.
Being what? Capacity to minute.
No, his ability to create spectacle and change the subject. He's an absolute master at drawing attention away from whatever scandal he's involved in. Right? I mean, take the Epstein files. Right? The guy's all over the Epstein files. And when I mean all over, I mean all over the Epstein files. His name appears in it, I think, more times than God does in the Bible, or something like that, or Jesus does in the Bible. It is insane. And he's managed to basically get away with it. It's one of the biggest scandals in political history, right? Being involved with Jeffrey Epstein. He's got photos with him. Trump likes young girls. We know all of this stuff is true. Does anyone really not believe that Trump was having, sex with underage girls on Jeffrey Epstein Island? Of course he was, right? But he's gotten away with it. It's Teflon Trump. It's like Tony Blair, right? At least for a while. Guy can get away with anything. I mean, the stories about Trump are crazy, right? I mean, his ex-wife wrote in a book about how he raped her, right? So he's been accused of sexual assault and rape by 19 different women, credibly, right? He's been found guilty of rape in a civil court. He's been legally liable for rape in a civil court case in New York City, right? Or in the state of New York, rather, with E.G. Carroll. Gets away with it. He's able to just completely shift the attention away from himself onto something new, some new disaster that he's involved in.
Well, he just rage baits, doesn't he? He just
Oh yeah,
He just outrages. He just feigns outrage to get people to be like, yeah. He just turns it back on them by, deliberately provoking them or being or making them feel defensive, and then it's all very tactful. But as to whether or not that plays out into long strategic thinking, I'm not sure. But yeah.
Well, it's not necessarily. I don't know whether you could call it a strategy, but it's a certain type of behavior that's yielded enormous results for him, tangible results for him. I mean, the 2024 presidential election was. I mean, he ran. If you look at the inside reports of what was going on in his campaign, it was incredible. I mean, a disaster, just a disaster. By the end of the campaign, most of his own staff wanted him to lose. It was so bad. But he won. I got it wrong. I mean, look, I'll hold my hands up, right? I spent a lot of that time saying this guy's not going to win. It's impossible for him to win. He hasn't got he doesn't have the money. His campaign's all over the place. No way are the Democrats going to lose to this guy because he's not a serious candidate. But his ability to, whip up the masses and change the subject is extraordinary. So I think people should never underestimate how good he is at that.
Well, that's quite a point by which to take stock of, isn't it, Ben? But I always love really talking with you. It's been really interesting. Guess we'll have to do this again. Talk about the state of the Iran war with Trump, and what have you got coming up on the channel on the Substack? What are you working on?
Oh yeah, on the banter. I mean, we're going to be digging more into what's happening with Iran, looking at the ins and outs of this so-called deal that he's got coming up. Covering the endless corruption that Trump is involved in. We've got the UFC White House, the UFC fight coming up, which is a sort of homage to ancient Rome, really. This is another spectacle that Trump is involved in, and deliberately so. Getting back to my point about his ability to create spectacle and change the narrative, right? He's about to hold a mixed martial arts cage fight at White House lawn. So again, this is another grand. This is clearly, this is what the Romans did, right? To distract the public away from any issues in the empire, right? Where you hold these massive games, and this is where we're at now. So we'll be talking about that as well in the banter in the next few days.
All right. Well, I'd love to see that, and I hope we can have another chat maybe on Iran and the MOU and anything on that. I've got a couple of videos coming out on that over the weekend, actually, guys. So do keep a lookout for those. But Ben, thank you always. Everyone, do check out Ben's work on the banter, and we'll see you all soon. Going to be joining another guest in the next hour as well, so keep a lookout for that as well. But we'll speak soon.